photograph showed a man in his shadow. The man was 32. The shadow was dying. But I need to start with the checkpoint because that's where they first noticed something was wrong. The file arrived yesterday. No classification. Just a reference code. KGB PSV Leningrad 1983 Observe. The folder was black cardboard, the expensive kind they used for internal security documentation. But someone had written on it in pencil, then erased it, then written again. I could see the ghost impressions of multiple words scraped away. The only one still legible: don't photograph. Too late for that advice now. Inside, 17 pages. The first was a security incident report from Checkpoint Gamma 7, Leningrad KGB headquarters, dated April 3, 1983. Junior Lieutenant Sokolov reporting. Standard language, standard format. Everything routine until paragraph 3. At 1447, Senior Investigator Anatoly Karpov presented credentials for building access. Subject appeared in normal health. Alert, responsive, appropriate grooming. However, surveillance footage review revealed anomalous shadow behavior. Subject's shadow displayed physical characteristics inconsistent with subject's appearance. Recommend medical evaluation. Attached to the report was a still frame from the security camera. Black and white, grainy, the way everything looked in 1983. It showed Karpov at the checkpoint, standing under the overhead lights. He was young, fit, dark hair, clean-shaven. Exactly what a 32-year-old KGB investigator should look like. His shadow showed an old man, hunched, thin. The shadow's hair was wispy, receding. The shoulders were rounded with age. The posture was wrong. Not the confident stance of Karpov's body, but the careful, pained positioning of someone with arthritis. I stared at that image for 20 minutes, looking for the trick, the angle of light, the distortion, the camera artifact that would explain it. There was none. The shadow was simply old, while the man was young. Page 2 was the medical evaluation. Dr. Viktor Orlov, KGB medical staff. He examined Karpov on April 4th. Physical health, excellent. No anomalies. Karpov himself reported feeling fine, sleeping well, no unusual symptoms. When shown the security footage, Karpov laughed. Called it a camera malfunction, equipment failure. Dr. Orlov didn't think it was equipment failure. His notes, written carefully like a man building a case, described conducting the examination in a room with controlled lighting. Single source, overhead, bright white, standard shadow conditions. Subject stood for full-body photography. Shadow cast displayed consistent anomalous characteristics. Shadow appeared to represent subject at approximate age 70 to 75 years. Posture stooped, apparent muscle atrophy, decreased height relative to subject's actual stature. When subject moved, shadow movement was delayed by approximately 0.3 seconds. When this delay was pointed out, subject became agitated and denied any irregularity. The doctor included photographs, 4 angles, clinical documentation. In each one, Karpov stood straight and young. His shadow bent with age, but it was the delay that bothered me. Shadows don't lag, they can't. They're the absence of light, not a separate entity. They move when you move because they're not moving at all. You're just changing the shape of the absence. Unless what? Page 3 was a psychological evaluation. Dr. Elena Vasilyeva, psychiatric specialist. April 6th. Karpov was cooperative but defensive. He insisted there was nothing wrong with him. The shadow was a trick of light. Everyone was overreacting. He had important cases to work. This was wasting his time. Dr. Vasilyeva's assessment. Subject displays normal cognitive function. No signs of delusion or perceptual distortion. Subject is aware that others perceive his shadow as anomalous, but cannot or will not acknowledge the phenomenon himself. When asked to look at his own shadow, subject reports seeing nothing unusual. This is inconsistent with observed reality, suggesting selective perception failure or protective psychological mechanism. She recommended continued observation and psychiatric monitoring. She also noted, and I had to read this twice to be sure I understood, the subject appears to be aging normally in physical body, but shadow suggests accelerated aging process in parallel development. Uncertain of proper terminology. Request consultation with Theoretical Physics Department. Theoretical Physics for a shadow. Page 4 was where the file stopped being medical and became something else entirely. A memo from Colonel Dmitry Volkov, KGB Internal Security Division, dated April 8, 1983. Senior Investigator Karpov is hereby reassigned to desk duty, pending resolution of medical anomaly. All field operations suspended. Subject is not to be left alone at any time. Continuous observation protocol enacted. Designation, Protocol Shadow. Protocol Shadow, that's what they called it. What they called him. Not a person anymore. A protocol. The memo continued. Additional cases have been identified. Review of security footage from the past 6 months reveals 3 other individuals displaying similar shadow anomalies. All subjects are KGB personnel. All subjects report normal health. None acknowledge the phenomenon when directly confronted. All subjects' shadows display characteristics of advanced age relative to actual subject age. 3 others. It was spreading. Or it had always been there, and they were only just noticing. Page 5 was a list. 4 names, 4 photographs, 4 sets of medical data. Senior Investigator Anatoly Karpov, age 32. Shadow apparent age, 70-75. Lieutenant Irina Volkova, age 28. Shadow apparent age, 65-70. Major Boris Petrov, age 41. Shadow apparent age, 80+. Senior Technician Mikhail Orlov, age 35. Shadow apparent age, 75-80. All KGB. All working in the same building. All developing elderly shadows, while their bodies remained young. The next pages were surveillance logs. Day-by-day documentation of the 4 subjects over a 2-week period. Reading them was like watching a slow-motion horror film. April 9th. All subjects report normal health. Shadows continue to display age characteristics. Karpov's shadow measured 3 centimeters shorter than previous observation. Subject's actual height unchanged. April 11th. Volkova reports mild fatigue, attributes to stress. Shadow now displays apparent tremor in hands, even when subject's hands are still. April 13th. Petrov's shadow observed to move independently for 1.2 seconds while subject remained stationary. Subject unaware. When questioned, subject became hostile and denied any irregularity. Independent movement. The shadow moved while the person stood still. April 15th. Karpov's shadow displaying signs of extreme age. Severe stooping. Apparent difficulty maintaining balance. Shadow movement now delayed by approximately 0.8 seconds. Subject reports excellent health. Requests return to active duty. April 16th. Orlov collapsed during routine questioning. Medical examination revealed acute dehydration and muscle weakness despite adequate fluid intake and no prior health issues. Shadow barely visible under standard lighting conditions, appearing extremely frail. The observations became more clinical, more desperate. I could feel it in the language. These weren't doctors anymore. They were witnesses to something that shouldn't exist. April 18th. Volkova's shadow observed moving in opposite direction to subject's movement. Subject walked forward. Shadow appeared to step backward. Phenomenon lasted 4 seconds. Subject aware of observer's reaction but unable to perceive anomaly herself. April 20th. Petrov's shadow no longer consistently matching subject's position. Shadow observed standing when subject sitting. Shadow observed 3 meters away from subject's actual location. Subject reports feeling disconnected but cannot elaborate. April 22nd. Critical incident. Karpov found in observation room at 003U. Subject was asleep. Shadow was standing. Shadow was observed for 7 minutes engaging in independent movement, pacing, gesturing, appearing to examine surroundings. When subject woke, shadow immediately resumed normal position and behavior. Subject has no memory of the incident. The shadow was awake while the man slept. Page 12 was a theoretical analysis by Dr. Andrei Sakharov, not the dissident physicist, a different Sakharov, a KGB scientific consultant. His report was dense with jargon I barely understood. Quantum mechanics, parallel states, temporal displacement. But buried in the technical language was a simple hypothesis. The shadows may represent a temporal echo effect. Each subject's shadow is displaying their future state, specifically their physical condition at time of death. The phenomenon suggests a breakdown in temporal linearity at the quantum level, with subject's endpoint state becoming visible in present timeline through the medium of light absence. If accurate, this would indicate that all 4 subjects are approaching mortality events that will result in physical conditions matching current shadow presentation. The shadows were showing how they would die, and when. I had to stop reading, made tea, walked around my office, tried to process what I was reading. Because if this was real, if shadows could somehow display future states, then these 4 people were looking at their own deaths every time they stood in the light. And they couldn't see it. Only everyone else could. Page 13 was dated April 25, 1983. Medical emergency report. Major Boris Petrov died at 11:43. Cause, sudden cardiac arrest, age 41. He'd been sitting at his desk, filling out paperwork. Witnesses reported he'd stood up, taken 2 steps toward the door, and collapsed. Resuscitation efforts failed. The autopsy revealed severe arterial degradation, muscle atrophy, and organ deterioration consistent with advanced age. His body was 41 years old. His internal physiology was 80 plus. His shadow had been right. The report included a final observation. At time of death, subject's shadow was observed to stabilize. The apparent age of the shadow matched the apparent physical age of the deceased. Shadow no longer displays independent movement or temporal displacement characteristics. The shadow had caught up. Page 14, April 28th. Senior technician Mikhail Orlov requested immediate leave. Request denied due to ongoing observation protocol. Subject became increasingly agitated, claiming he needed to outrun it. When asked what he needed to outrun, subject pointed to his shadow and said, "When it catches me, I'm dead. I can see it now. I don't know why I couldn't see it before, but I see it now. It's been getting closer." He died 3 days later. Sudden neurological event. Massive stroke. His body aged 40 years in the final hour. The medical staff watched it happen. Watched his hair turn white, his skin wrinkle, his posture collapse. His shadow stabilized at time of death. Perfect match. Young shadow for an old corpse. Page 15 was a psychiatric note from Dr. Vasilyeva, dated May 3rd. She was evaluating the 2 remaining subjects, Karpov and Volkova. Both were deteriorating psychologically now that Petrov and Orlov were dead. Both could finally see their shadows. Both understood what it meant. Lieutenant Volkova attempted to avoid all light sources, Dr. Vasilieva wrote. She remains in darkened rooms, claims she feels safer without the shadow. But even in near total darkness, thermal imaging reveals the shadow persists. It is not dependent on visible light. It exists independent of illumination source. Senior investigator Karpov has become obsessed with measuring the delay between his movements and his shadow's response. He's timed it at 1.4 seconds now. He believes when the delay reaches 2.0 seconds, he will die. I have no scientific basis to confirm or deny this belief, but his conviction is absolute. The final entry for both subjects was dated May 7, 1983. Volkova died at 6:15. Heart failure. She was found in a completely dark room. No light sources. But witnesses entering the room reported seeing her shadow on the wall before they saw her body. The shadow was visible in absolute darkness, glowing faintly with its own light. The shadow was 68 years old, so was her corpse. Karpov died at 14:22. He'd been measuring the shadow delay every hour, writing down the numbers in a notebook they found on his body. The final entry, 1.97 seconds. It's almost time. He was right. He collapsed 17 minutes later. Respiratory failure, multiple organ shutdown, complete systemic collapse. His body aged 40 years in the time it took the ambulance to arrive. His shadow stabilized. Perfect match. No more delay, no more displacement. The man and his shadow were finally the same age. Page 16 was Colonel Volkov's final report. Filed May 10th, 1983, marked classified absolute restriction. Protocol shadow investigation concludes with 4 fatalities. Cause of phenomenon, unknown. Method of transmission, unknown. Potential for recurrence, unknown. All subjects were KGB personnel working in Section 7, internal surveillance. All subjects had recently reviewed classified materials related to temporal research projects from the 1960s. Possible connection to subject matter, unclear. Recommendation: Section 7 to be sealed. All personnel reassigned. All classified temporal research materials to be transferred to archives and restricted to Level 5 clearance only. Building security footage to be reviewed monthly for any recurrence of shadow anomalies. All KGB personnel to undergo mandatory shadow documentation as part of routine medical screening. Shadow documentation. They were going to photograph everyone's shadow, check for temporal displacement, screen for death. The final page was a memo dated May 15, 1983, brief, clinical. Observation: Colonel Dmitry Volkov's shadow displaying preliminary displacement characteristics. Apparent age differential, 15-20 years. Subject informed and placed under protocol shadow observation. Estimated timeline, unknown. The man investigating protocol shadow had developed protocol shadow. I closed the file. My office was bright. Overhead, fluorescent lights. I'd been reading for 3 hours. I stood up to stretch, and I didn't look down. Not immediately, because part of me didn't want to know. But eventually you have to look. That's human nature. That's curiosity. That's the same impulse that made those 4 KGB officers keep measuring, keep documenting, keep trying to understand even as they were dying. I looked at my shadow on the floor. It was fine, normal, matched my age, my posture, my position exactly. No delay, no displacement. No elderly version of myself dying on the office carpet. Relief, pure relief. Then my shadow moved, just slightly. A shift of weight from one foot to the other. Except, I hadn't moved. I was standing perfectly still. The shadow had moved first. I've been sitting in the dark for the past hour, writing this by phone light. The shadow isn't visible now. I tell myself that means it's not there, that it only exists in proper light, that I'm imagining things, but I know what thermal imaging would show. I know the shadow persists. I know it's there in the dark with me, aging, deteriorating, showing me what I'll become. I checked the security footage from this building. Standard practice now, apparently, monthly shadow screening, just like Colonel Volkov recommended 40 years ago. They've been doing it at every major government facility since 1983, looking for displacement, looking for temporal echo. They found 12 cases last year across Russia, 12 people whose shadows aged ahead of them. I accessed their files. All dead within 3 months of identification. All died of conditions matching their shadow's apparent age. None of them could see it at first. The mind protects itself. Selective perception. You see what you can handle seeing. But eventually, like Karpov and Volkova, they all start to see. They all start to understand. They all start measuring the delay between movement and shadow response. I stood up again, turned on the lights, looked down. My shadow is maybe 5 years older than me. Not much, just enough to notice. Slight rounding of the shoulders, bit of thinning at the hairline. Small changes. But the delay, I raised my hand. The shadow raised its hand. I counted in my head. 0.3 seconds. Same delay Dr. Orlov measured on Karpov at the beginning. I have the file on my desk. I could add my name to it. Report myself. Enter protocol shadow observation. Let them document my deterioration. Time the progression. Watch me die on schedule, or I could do what I suspect dozens of others have done. Close the file, say nothing. Work in dark rooms. Avoid mirrors and windows and any reflective surface that might show the truth. Pretend the shadow isn't getting older. Pretend the delay isn't increasing. Pretend I'm not dying on an accelerated timeline while my body remains stubbornly young. But here's what I keep thinking about. Why KGB personnel? Why specifically people who worked with classified temporal research? What did they see in those files? What did they learn that did this to them? I requested the archived materials from Section 7. Submitted the proper clearance forms. They should arrive next week. I know I shouldn't read them. I know that's probably what caused this. That knowledge itself might be the transmission vector. That understanding the phenomenon makes you vulnerable to it. But I need to know why. I need to understand what's happening to me, to my shadow, to the temporal echo that's aging in my place. Maybe there's a way to stop it. Maybe there's research, data, some Soviet scientists' notes that explain how to stabilize the displacement, how to fix the delay, how to keep your shadow from catching up. Or maybe I'm just doing what they all did. Measuring, documenting, trying to understand. While the shadow gets older and the delay gets longer and the deadline gets closer. My shadow just moved again. I'm sitting perfectly still at my desk, and my shadow shifted its weight, like it's getting uncomfortable, like it's tired of standing there dying while I sit here alive. 0.4 seconds now. The delay is increasing. I should stop writing, stop documenting. But that's the thing about protocol shadow. That's the trap. Once you notice, you can't stop noticing. You measure the delay compulsively. You watch your shadow age. You count down the seconds until it catches up. Because in the end, that's all we are. Shadows, waiting to stabilize. Living people becoming dead reflections. Bodies that haven't caught up to their own endings yet. The file is still open on my desk. 17 pages of people who learn to see their deaths, who watch themselves die in shadow before dying in flesh. Soon, there will be 18 pages. The lights in my office are very bright. my shadow is very clear. And somewhere in the dark parts of myself, the places where light doesn't reach, I can feel time moving differently, faster, aging me from the inside out, starting with the shadow and working its way to the bone. 0.5 seconds. It's catching up.